Good morning, and welcome to Acapulco, with our view overlooking El Morro Beach, which in the regional Spanish is Playa El Morro. Do you see anything peculiar in this picture? The detail I'm referring to is this round object right here. What do you think that is? Moreover, does it even matter? Isn't it probably just nothing, just a dark patch in the clouds? Well, of course, if you've had time to watch my other documentaries on this, you'll already know what I'm pointing out here. Before continuing on with what I was going to say, there's another detail we should address. And I'm referring to the focus, the visual clarity of this video image. In the short time we've already watched, you may have noticed that the image seems to fluctuate somewhat. At some points, the details of what's in the sky there may seem clear and well enough defined. But then, suddenly, it goes blurry and out of focus. So, what's going on with that? To make a long story short, over the past several years in my continuous research and observations, this situation of the video imagery suddenly degrading to a poor level of definition is a regular occurrence, a continuous problem. So we raise the question, what is doing that? Why does the image keep phasing out of focus? Seeking to answer that, one important factor to note is that when these issues occur, almost in every instance, it only happens to areas up in the sky. Often, we'll start seeing something extraordinary there in the sky, and then suddenly, the definition gets knocked down to where you just can't be sure of what you're seeing. When these sections of the sky are phasing out of focus, the rest of the webcam view remains unaffected. At any rate, the question that arises is that could it be that there is an intentional process to prevent these things from being clearly visible? Of course, the mere suggestion of that can be immediately tarred and feathered as a wacky conspiracy theory, with a scolding rebuke like,
"Come on, that is so ridiculous that you think there could be some organized institution who tries to prevent the public from seeing certain information."
And I might reply in an effort to be agreeable, saying,
Yeah, I see what you mean. For example, a huge, well-known social platform like Twitter or Facebook or Google certainly wouldn't engage in hiding certain information and certain voices because they don't concur with the official narrative. No, nothing like that goes on, does it?
So, to be direct and to the point, the subject we're dealing with is in reality completely silenced, cloaked, refuted, and denied. Now, this aspect of our solar system pronounces that our sun has what seems to be a binary counterpart, nicknamed Nemesis. Apparently, it's a red dwarf star, a bit larger than Jupiter in size. But the real bombshell is that this celestial body has 7 planets orbiting it. The fact is, endeavoring to find out about this, we are dealing with something that is under total lockdown, covered up, silenced, hidden, denied. When it comes to the accusation or suspicion that they, whoever they are, could be intentionally obscuring our view of the sky, well, an outrageous demonstration of this is going on right over our heads and right in our faces. We're talking about chemtrails. And of course, the establishment denies they even exist, but here's a few quick glimpses of what doesn't exist. Glimpses of what you can see right in front of your eyes and over our heads. Going on day after day, all around the world. We have extensive satellite imagery witnessing the relentless deployment of this worldwide aerosol spraying program. In this satellite view, we have Japan and the sea stretching toward North and South Korea. Let's zoom in a little more to get it clearly understood that this mess is created by aircraft deploying chemical trails that remain aloft and spread out over time.
Seriously? Look at this crap. Oh yeah, this is natural. Those are freaking airplanes. Crisscross, tic-tac-toe. Spread out, they make lines, they turn into, we're being poisoned. We are being poisoned. They are
Does this lady sound irate, upset about all the chemtrails that have been sprayed in all directions over the town she lives in? Well, I'd like to emphasize she is absolutely right. I'm going to replay this lady's video one more time, and I'll not interrupt.
Seriously? Look at this crap. Oh yeah, this is natural. Those are freaking airplanes. Crisscross, tic-tac-toe. Spread out, they make lines, they turn into, we're being poisoned. We are being poisoned. They are spraying us. They're spraying every inch of our planet every single day. That is not real or normal.
There are videos like this from people all around the world. Here's a brief clip from Germany, 2018. Please pardon the low quality that he got here.
Ja, macht so weiter, macht so weiter. Das geht nicht mehr lang gut, das sage ich euch. Ihr macht die ganze Natur kaputt. Die Ausläufe von der dritten Startbahn. Wir brauchen keine dritte, wir brauchen 15 Startbahnen.
We'll move on from chemtrails in a moment, but first we need to establish the point that brought us to this subject in the first place. Is there an intentional effort to obscure our view of the sky? The answer is definitely yes. To illustrate a point, we'll use this footage from 17th of June 2019. As far as what town or city this is, I've lost track of where this particular one is from. However, that doesn't actually matter because the details that this illustrates apply to these aerosols being sprayed all over the world. I could pull up hundreds of video clips that would clearly show the same thing that I want us to notice here. It's a basic, simple thing that we already know, so you'll have to pardon me for stating the obvious. In clear view here is the initial form of these trails when laid out by the aircraft. They begin as a tightly defined line of the aerosol compound, and in the same picture we see what will become of those lines over the next couple hours. They spread out and continue to disperse to the point where we don't even see a specific trail anymore, but at the same time a kind of sheet has formed across that area of the sky. do have a degree of confirmed intel on what is contained in these massive aerosols. But this video is not intended to be a documentary about chemtrails. If time allows, I'll come back to this in a specific documentary. The point to register at the moment is that with this extensive spraying being done, it's plainly obvious just in this picture alone how that stuff can remain up there at altitude and then fan out, dispersing into an entire plasma layer stretching across the sky. And due to its composition, integrating nano-sized metal particulates that are highly conductive, there are incredible ways that this man-made screen can be utilized and manipulated in ways of reflectivity, and even being able to receive electromagnetic projection of various signals. After a few more hours for the aerosols to fully disperse, we end up with skies like this. Check out this scene from Clackamas County, Oregon. Just an average, peaceful Wednesday afternoon. A man goes out to do a little shopping and ends up stopping to capture a view of the sky because, in his opinion, something doesn't look quite right about it. Notice here that we've got a blue sky back there. A lot of chemtrails getting in the way, but nevertheless we can see that the sky is blue behind it all. But now look. That should be a sunny blue sky right there. But it's totally obliterated. At this stage, people who are observant and alert over these recent years can take one look at that sky and clearly recognize that all that fluff and sludge is not regular natural clouds. All of that sky block is from the aircraft busy bees that have been pumping out tank loads of a secret cocktail. The international powers that are doing this do not disclose a full and unredacted report on what these compounds are and what they are purposed for. Dealing with this subject in connection with the Planet X situation is challenging because if I bring up the subject of chemtrails, I feel like it automatically becomes insufficient if I don't give the full range of information, facts, and proofs. I just now mentioned that the international powers that are doing this do not let the public know what's contained in these aerosols and what the full purpose of all this is. So that makes me have to add, yes, we do know for a fact a lot of what is contained in chemtrails, and we know a lot about the alleged purposes. But for now, the single reason for going over this subject is that one of the purposes of this aerosol deployment program is definitely to prevent the general population from seeing the Planet X Nemesis System that in recent decades has arrived back into our region of the solar system. We'll proceed now to look specifically at some examples of details in the sky amidst the mosh of stratospheric aerosol deposits. Or in other words, we're going to look at some situations where even though all this effort has been done to cloak the sky, sometimes we can still see things showing through. But I hasten to add, for a person who does not know about Planet X and the Nemesis System, this cloaking of the sky is a great success. For the entire mass of the general population, they are in no way going to suppose that an additional planetary body could be lurking overhead at this very moment. As I've discussed in a lot of these videos, an idea such as that is so preposterous that, well, no one is looking. With our mindset fully educated about what is and what isn't in our solar system, you can be sure that if such a person happens to look up and see a remarkably 360 degrees round object up there, seemingly amidst the clouds, well, the mind will just not see it. So even if someone does see it, they won't see it. The following video clip, about 6 minutes long, is from a documentary I did last year.
Howdy YouTube. I just thought I'd sit here and get the Toledo skyline sunset for you today. And check this out. I have never seen this many chemtrails. I couldn't get pulled over. I'm just sitting here and it's a beautiful sunset. If you don't mind looking through all the chemtrails. Just look at the one. There's another one above the sun. Look close. Dropping another trail.
Okay, what are we seeing in this picture? The first thing right off the bat is this. We'll come back to that later. So what else is seen in this picture? Well, we've got the sun proceeding towards sunset, while also the entire sky is obscured by the spraying and the dispersion of chemtrails. I've discussed in earlier videos that one of the express purposes of this program is to literally obscure the sky to prevent the general population of the world from being able to see the various manifestations of the arrival of the Planet X system. Notice this dark spherical shape here. Thus the question arises, what is that? And the correct answer there seems just plain impossible. It's a huge planetary body here in our solar system. Now, in previous videos, I've already addressed the dilemma of how ludicrous and totally impossible that sounds. So, if you would like further explanation supporting this crazy-looking statement, please refer to the earlier videos on this channel, and one in particular would be number 6, I think, Planet X in View number 6. One important factor that comes up often is that there are several planets orbiting the red dwarf star of the Nemesis System, as we touched upon at the beginning of this video. This bit of information is vital to make sense of what we're seeing in our skies these days. An example of how it is crucial to understand this fact is seen in this picture from Michael's June 26th video. A minute ago, we noted this round object. We come back to it now to examine things a little further. Let's trace out the object. And thus, upon closer observation, we realize that there are two objects, or two circular shapes there, and the smaller one on the right is apparently the one in front. So that brings us to now 3 of these round celestial objects we've noted. And so the first one was this down here. Again, let's zoom in a bit on that. You know, I think that seeing an image like this, and like this one, potentially causes us to get a mild case of, or maybe not so mild case, of cognitive dissonance, which in simple terms is to say that we can't believe what our eyes are seeing. Now, one other thing to keep in our awareness about this situation is, again, look at this area here, this overall veil that's been caused by the aerosol spraying program. We must keep that in mind, that it is achieving the intended purpose to conceal the general view. And while we're looking at this spot, right in front of us there, in the center of the picture, there is a huge planetary body right there. It's quite well concealed, but it also shows through at times.
gorgeous sunset, gorgeous day. Spent a good portion of the day on my jet skis. Well, the afternoon, I should say. Remodeling a house prior to that.
One last thing before moving on to the next event is this. We've identified a few spherical bodies already in this scene, and we hadn't even noted this one yet. So how can there be one more on top of those that we found already? I mean, seriously? Another one? One potential reaction is to just drop the whole thing, because it's hard enough to entertain the possibility of one of these shadows being cast from a planetary body. But to add on to that, a second, a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, well, it begins to feel like if you stare at the picture long enough, you'll start seeing planets everywhere. This dilemma demonstrates how it is crucial to understand that there are multiple celestial bodies in this situation. Now, before leaving Michael's video of the Toledo, Ohio sky, we've just got to take a moment to notice this extraordinary appearance once more. This is a picture that I took on June 1st, 2019. We were out for a walk on the Hastings, England seafront promenade. I noticed that the sky looked pretty messed up with aerosol spraying. So, after a little while, I just aimed my camera up toward the sun and snapped a few photos. There was no particular reason. Indeed, you couldn't see any detail up there because of the blinding, unnatural, intense glare of the sun. So, just blindly aimed the camera and snapped a few. Days later, when I took time to look at the photos, this detail was there. I didn't see it at first, but at some point, eventually, it caught my view. It seems to me that you don't see it at first until your eyesight resolves the image. And then, of course, once you do catch sight of it, the circular body stands out. One thing that can help is if we reduce the size of the picture. This tightens the resolution a little bit. We'll go back to full-size image now. I have to clarify that there are additional curious details in this picture that we won't take time here to point out and discuss. We'll keep the main attention on this particular round impression and a couple other aspects of this photo. So again, there may be things you notice that seem worth looking into, yet they may not even get mentioned here. It's because there's a lot of data and other events I want to bring into this discussion. Let's try adjusting the brightness down about 30%. Actually, I think that has helped to bring this object out a little more. Bringing this picture up opens a flood of additional questions. We could assert that surely that round, faint impression is just a coincidental detail. And a more cynical challenger might rightfully say, come on, look, it's barely visible. You have to just about imagine that you're seeing it there in order to see it. And what about here? And here? And here? In fact, if you stare at it long enough, You could think you're seeing round things or planets just about everywhere. Okay, so we've raised 2 argument points there. Let's address those. Number 1, the supposed object is barely visible. An answer for that query is, you say it's barely visible? Well, no kidding. We've just spent the last 20 minutes noticing the reality of a monstrous stratospheric aerosol spraying operation, chemtrails. And so on top of the many examples we looked at, you can add one more to it. Here in this photo that I took in Hastings, England, we can see right there that the sky is just plastered over. Here's a few more random photos that I took on that day, in which we can see that there's an outrageous chemtrail assault being done. So, yeah, that round planetary body-looking thing isn't easy to see. While it's barely visible, it's actually a lucky strike that we can see it even this well, because, for the most part, these things are totally masked over successfully, to where, in the great majority of situations, nobody ever sees any trace of what's right out there, above our heads, as it were. In the second query, we noted that a complaint could be raised saying, the round object that you spotted there becomes unimportant because if you look for it, you can find round features or planet-shaped objects everywhere in that sky. Okay, that's a valid concern. And of course, one thing we really don't want is to fall into the gross error, the inane blunder of thinking we've spotted a rogue planet in the sky when in fact it's nothing. Nothing but a coincidental round-shaped cloud or a ball of smoke, etc. So, with due recognition given to that factor, the main astonishing answer to the quandary of multiple round-looking impressions being apparent is the detail mentioned already. This dwarf star we're dealing with has got 7 Earth-sized planets orbiting it. Now in this picture at Hastings, England, we've pointed out one object thus far. Let's take a moment and look further into this visual data. So here's the one we've already pointed out, and it comes as almost a surprise when we look a little closer and realize that there's an additional spherical body to the left of the one we've noted and situated behind it. This is incredible. This actually should be headline news. It's easy to underestimate what's right in front of our nose here because of it being so faint and difficult to see, because of the veil of chemtrail obscurity that's been disseminated across the sky here. So ask yourself, because of the way it appears so nebulous there, does that psychologically make you esteem what you're seeing as less important? Less real and more of probably just nothing. And that response is because it's faint and hard to see it there. So again, the question we have to ask is, does that make it any less real? At this stage, it's relevant and valuable to understand that this photo is 100% untouched. The only alteration was a couple minutes ago we experimented with lowering the brightness by 30%. And here the picture is back to the default setting, with no adjustment to the brightness or any other aspect. This is simply what the camera captured. One last detail that I must mention. The object on the left out of these two here, I find it to be extremely elusive and tricky to keep sight of it. In the process of just putting this video together, I've continually gone through the situation where my eyesight manages to latch on to the object on the left, but then in the next moment, it's lost again. I look and cannot see it there. But then again, you just have to relax a bit, don't try too hard, and suddenly you latch onto it again. Funny enough, it seems that no matter how many times I've pinpointed it and can see it right there, in the next moment, it's gone again. Coming back to the location we started with, El Morro Beach at Acapulco, let's look again, while bearing in mind some of the points we've touched upon in this discussion, namely the fact that there are multiple planets involved in this situation. Earlier, our attention was on this detail. Let us now look a little closer at this over to the left. Again, this is difficult to see, and a lot of the time it's just impossible to see it. However, to be clear and direct in what I'm saying here, I'm not pointing to a wisp of clouds and suggesting, oh, doesn't that seem like maybe a planet-shaped thing is maybe there? No. I'm stating unequivocally there is a planetary body there, a celestial body belonging to the Nemesis System. And for a short time, we can literally see it there. Now, every time I make that statement in these various documentaries, I feel it just cannot be said without adding this. According to all that we know, and according to the science that is well established, that which I said is ludicrous. It's impossible, based on the science that is established. However, in spite of all that we know, there it is. I've talked about this paradox in previous documentaries, so let's not have to go over it all again here. We've got another event here that gives us some new leverage in this soul-wrenching wrestle with the burning questions surrounding Planet X, the Nemesis. The date of this footage, January 27th, 2021. Let's observe the sky for a moment. Look. That's incredible. Do you realize that what we can see here is seriously huge? Huge in terms of major news headlines that should have blazed around the world on television, radio, and printed broadcasts. In terms of size, though, it's also huge. From the info we have thus far, that object would be roughly the size of planet Earth. Also, consider for a moment, if this area of the sky was plastered with chemtrail spraying, such as in the examples we've looked at, do you think this extraordinary object would be visible? Notice this streak of white. At some point, we might have presumed that to be a chemtrail, but in this case, it's not. And the correct assessment of what that is stunning. It's a belt or a kind of ring that travels with the planet wrapped around it, of either clouds and atmosphere or perhaps debris or plasma, don't know what, but it is attached or wrapped with the planet. This is one of the distinctive characteristics that is often visible showing that at least one or more of these planetary bodies do have a sort of ring or atmospheric belt of some kind that also becomes a tail that drags behind the celestial body in its movement. So far, in this date and location, we've noted this spherical body. And in further observation, we find a second object over to the left. Now, the effort to distinguish these things becomes more convoluted as another player comes into view here. While it is important to note the appearance of object number 2 there, and further we have the third, smaller spherical body that comes into view, it's also useful here to dismiss these details and return our focus onto this. Now there's one more factor that needs to be addressed. This object that I highlighted first has got yet another spherical body in front of it. In the process of editing this video, setting in place the indicator marks, circles, arrows, etc., my eyesight gradually discerned this smaller body in front of the larger one. Now this, of course, brings back the quandary I mentioned earlier, and that is, when we keep finding another and yet another spherical body, and yet a fourth one in this little group that we've pointed out, it all becomes more than the average person can take. So now that we've identified these parts, I want to also say, okay, let's try and forget about them as well. And there's a reason for that. This one item here is quite obvious over the footage that I've played here. It's quite solid and sure that you are seeing that round object. So my point is, never mind if there's several planets there, because if there's even one rogue planetary body that's not one of the 9 known members of our solar system, well, that's huge, and that means that something extraordinary is upon us. And so, if we register that, well, we're making progress. But if we get all tangled up in the minutiae of...
Why can't we see 3 planets all the time if there's supposed to be 3 planets there? And, well, I can see that there's one there, but as far as claiming there's this one over to the right and there's one over to the left, well, they're not solidly visible, and...
And it goes on and on and on, etc., etc. In all that fog, we just lose the plot for the whole thing. We even lose a grip on what is clear. So it can be advantageous to simplify. We break it down to what is clear and proceed from there. You know, all these maybes and might-bes can be counterproductive. So are we settled on the fact that there's definitely one right there? So we'll take the value of that and not let it get convoluted with the more ambiguous impressions in this visual data. A fundamental means of discerning whether an appearance like this is real or merely a coincidental mirage is to have video footage in which the detail of interest can be observed in its movement, as opposed to having only a still frame snapshot to view. There are various ways a mere coincidental appearance will expose itself as being nothing, if we have video footage covering the evolution or progress of the detail in question. We have such video footage here. Over the next 30 minutes, this celestial body continues along its orbital path, and from our viewpoint, it moves toward the left. Let's put a vertical line here to mark the position of this object. Thus we can note that the left edge of the circle pretty much aligns with the left side of that building. Later, of course, this marker will help establish clearly what movement has transpired. We'll speed up the playback here in order to watch about 30 minutes of footage in 3 minutes. And also we'll reduce the image size to try and concentrate the definition a little bit. We're in a situation where even seeing the object there moving across the sky, most of us just cannot realize it. One interesting sideline point is if the television, the newspapers, and the mainstream media was to show this same footage and say it's a celestial body belonging to the Planet X system, well, suddenly, no problem. People would believe it full on, because the TV or the newspapers said so. A moment ago, you may have noticed some abrupt flashes in the video. So what was that? Let's back up. So here we are at the time point of 10:48 a.m. Now when we saw those flashes a minute ago, the playback speed was still cranked way up. Thus, I'm putting the speed back to real time so that we can see what actually took place. Oh, and I'll also put the image back to full size. I'll hit play, and those flashes will come along in about 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Wow. Now that was extremely odd and interesting. So let's take a moment and get to know this event to ascertain if it's just nothing, just some kind of a camera glitch, or if something in nature and reality just happened there. Let's replay that again. The precise time mark of the occurrence is at 10:48 and 21 seconds. Endeavoring to understand this, the first thing I need to verify is these sudden bursts of the light are not from an equipment glitch of some kind. They're not from camera light sensors trying to adjust or compensate. Those massive surges in the light are coming from nature, not from an internal flaw of the camera technology. Next, we need to determine where the sun is, and the shadows from the buildings give us an instant answer on that. Along with information we already know about this site at Mexico City, the sun is outside of our field of view over to the right and upward, and is at the daytime height of about 10 minutes before 11 a.m. Realizing where the sun is enables us to also realize the significance of how these light bursts seem to be coming from the horizon, not from the overhead position where the sun is. Interesting. While there remain plenty of unanswered questions, the baseline factor is this is one of many anomalous events showing us that something extraordinary is unfolding in our solar system at this time. You see that? You do realize this has been here before, in ancient times. Also, from ancient days, there are a number of prophecies that in the latter days, or in the last dispensation of the world, this would come back again. And in a lot of those messages of ancient origin, this thing is called the Destroyer.